The story of Gaza right now is one that feels both familiar and unbearable at the same time. The world is once again watching a mass displacement of people, and this time, the order has been given for residents of Gaza City to leave their homes under the shadow of relentless bombardment. For many, this is not the first time they are forced to pack what little they can carry, leaving behind neighborhoods, schools, mosques, and memories, heading into an uncertain journey that carries both physical danger and deep emotional scars. The order to evacuate has triggered what can only be described as an exodus, with tens of thousands moving south, traveling by foot in overcrowded cars or on donkey carts, all while warplanes continue to roar overhead and explosions echo around them. To understand this exodus, we have to first look at the conditions that made such a decision possible. Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas in the world, with over 2 million people crammed into a small strip of land just 25 miles long. For years, the territory has been under a blockade that has crippled the economy, restricted the flow of goods and people, and made life for its residents extremely fragile. Hospitals function under severe shortages, infrastructure is weak, and electricity is scarce. When bombardments begin, there are few places to hide, and shelters quickly overflow with frightened families. The evacuation order, however, does not come with any guarantee of safety. People are told to leave one area, but the places they flee to are also not immune to strikes. Families that leave Gaza City find themselves moving toward southern towns and villages, but many of those areas have also been targeted. For civilians, especially women, children, and the elderly, this becomes a horrifying dilemma. Do they stay in their homes and risk being bombed? Or do they set out on dangerous roads, becoming vulnerable to attacks along the way? This is the cruel paradox of displacement under siege. Eyewitness accounts describe harrowing scenes on the streets of Gaza. Parents holding tightly onto their children, elderly people unable to keep up, people carrying plastic bags with whatever food or water they could manage, and long convoys of vehicles crawling southward, all marked by exhaustion and fear. Alongside them are ambulances struggling to move the wounded, often blocked by rubble or damaged roads. The psychological trauma of such a mass movement cannot be overstated. Imagine being told overnight to leave your entire life behind, not knowing if you will ever return or what you will find if you do. This is not the first displacement in the history of the Palestinian people. Many in Gaza are descendants of families who were forced out of their homes during the Nakba of 1948, when hundreds of thousands fled or were expelled from towns and villages across what became Israel. For those families, the memory of forced migration is not history. It is an inherited trauma, passed down through generations, and now being relived in real time. The feeling of history repeating itself adds a layer of pain that outsiders can only begin to imagine. Technically, the order to evacuate is framed as a military measure, a way to separate civilians from combat zones. But in reality, with such a small enclosed area like Gaza, there is no real safe zone. The South does not have the capacity to absorb such massive numbers. Infrastructure there is already weak, hospitals are overcrowded, and access to food, water, and medicine is severely limited. International aid groups have warned that forcing people to move en masse without secure humanitarian corridors amounts to collective punishment, creating more suffering than relief. The humanitarian angle is perhaps the most crucial here. Bombardments do not discriminate between homes, schools, mosques, or markets. Civilians are always caught in the crossfire. With entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, clean water supplies destroyed, and power plants shut down, life becomes almost unlivable. Children especially are at risk, not just physically but emotionally, as they endure nights of fear, hunger, and displacement. For Muslim families in Gaza, faith often becomes the only source of strength, as they cling to prayer and community solidarity to endure unimaginable hardship. It is not unusual to see families, despite their fear, gathering to recite Quran, seeking patience and protection, even in the midst of bombardment. From a broader perspective, this mass displacement raises critical questions about the rules of war and the obligations of those who hold power. International law emphasizes the protection of civilians, especially in conflict zones, but the reality on the ground tells a very different story. When entire cities are told to evacuate without proper shelters or aid waiting for them, the protection of civilians becomes more of a slogan than a reality. The imbalance of power is stark, with one side equipped with advanced weaponry and the other side composed largely of families struggling just to survive. The forced evacuation is not only a humanitarian crisis, but also a political one. Every act of displacement deepens mistrust, fuels anger, and entrenches the sense of injustice felt by Palestinians. To many in the Muslim world, the images of families being uprooted, children crying, and mosques reduced to rubble strike a deep emotional chord, resonating as a collective wound that transcends borders. It is a reminder of the ongoing struggle of the Palestinian people, a struggle tied to dignity, land, and identity. On the ground, the logistical challenges of moving such a large population under fire are staggering. Roads are damaged, fuel is scarce, and communications are often cut. Aid convoys struggle to reach those in need. In some cases, families are split apart, with parents and children separated in the chaos of evacuation. This creates long-lasting scars that do not heal easily. Displacement is not just a temporary event. It alters lives permanently. Homes may be lost forever, schools destroyed, businesses ruined. For many, returning becomes impossible, and what begins as a temporary evacuation turns into permanent exile. The bombardments themselves add to the tragedy. Gaza City, once the heart of commerce and culture in the Strip, is being reduced to ruins. Landmarks, universities, and places of worship are disappearing under airstrikes. The destruction of civilian infrastructure not only makes survival harder now, but also cripples the possibility of recovery in the future. Rebuilding after such devastation takes years, sometimes decades, and often those who flee never see their homes restored. This creates a cycle of poverty and dependency that becomes extremely difficult to break. The resilience of the people, however, is something that cannot be ignored. Despite the hardship, there are countless stories of neighbors helping one another, of strangers sharing food and shelter, of doctors and nurses working tirelessly in overcrowded hospitals with minimal supplies. The human spirit, especially within Gaza's Muslim community, shines through in moments of collective struggle. This resilience is both inspiring and heartbreaking because it underscores how ordinary people are forced to show extraordinary strength simply to survive. International reactions to the exodus vary, but for those living it, external statements do little to change their reality. What matters to them is safety, food, water, and the hope that one day they can return to their homes. For the global Muslim audience, watching these scenes unfold brings feelings of solidarity, grief, and a renewed call for justice. The displacement of Muslims in Gaza is not seen in isolation, but as part of a larger pattern of struggles faced by Muslim communities in conflict zones worldwide. At the same time, there are technical considerations that shape the crisis. For instance, the destruction of roads and bridges limits movement, creating bottlenecks that slow evacuations. Fuel shortages make transportation almost impossible for many families, forcing them to walk for miles with children in tow. Hospitals, already under strain, cannot cope with the surge of wounded people, and many facilities are forced to operate without electricity, relying on generators that could fail at any moment. These logistical breakdowns transform the evacuation from a difficult challenge into a near-impossible ordeal. There is also the psychological aspect of mass displacement. For children, the sound of bombs, the sight of destruction, and the experience of leaving home under duress are traumas that shape their futures. Many will grow up with deep scars of fear and loss. For parents, the helplessness of not being able to protect their families is devastating. For the elderly, the pain of seeing a lifetime of memories destroyed is beyond words. Displacement is not just about losing a roof over one's head. It is about losing identity, community, and history. This exodus from Gaza represents more than just a military maneuver. It is a human tragedy that will echo for generations. The act of ordering residents out amid bombardment highlights the vulnerability of civilians caught between political forces they cannot control. It reminds us of the immense imbalance in this conflict, where ordinary families carry the heaviest burden. For the people of Gaza, this forced movement is not a choice, but a desperate attempt at survival. For the Muslim community globally, it reinforces the sense of duty to stand in solidarity, to advocate for justice, and to never let the suffering of Gaza be normalized or forgotten.